After a scathing report about Phoenix Suns owner Robert Sarver came to light, NBA fans, players, staff, and media members all awaited the punishment the NBA would give him after it was announced that there would be an internal investigation. To anyone who actually read the report, anything less than an outright lifetime ban from the league, followed by Sarver being forced to sell his stake in the team, would not be enough. And well, we finally got this report back from the NBA recently, and as it turns out, Sarver will essentially be getting a slap on the wrist. Now, he has decided to sell the team on his own accord. However, A, this reeks of under-the-table action, which we'll cover later, and B, this is still a moral failing by the league. Given the details of that report, which we will be going over, this is a massive failure by Adam Silver and the league at large, and a hypocritical failure at that. And moreover, this exposes an issue that is league-wide that to this point has been swept under the rug. So before we get into the details of this report, I want to make it very clear that Sarver selling the team is not inherently a victory. Yes, it means he will be gone, finally, but the NBA is allowing him to leave with his head held high when he very much should be leaving in disgrace. And that's an important distinction. The NBA applying mild disciplinary action, again basically a slap on the wrist, and then him selling on his own accord isn't nearly the same as the NBA outright condemning Sarver and making it clear that there is no place for his kind of behavior in the NBA. By not condemning Sarver, they are allowing the very idea of Sarver and the type of behavior that Sarver displayed to still exist within the league's culture. Now, we will be talking about that more in depth a little bit later, but now let me actually give you the full context of this situation in case you are not aware. Before I get into the details of this report, I feel I should warn you that there is going to be multiple references to racism, misogyny, verbal abuse, abuse of power, and really just overall Sarver being a fucking dick. You know, if you don't want to hear that kind of stuff, then move on, I guess. All of that said, you have been warned. Let's get into this report, and it's not going to be a fun thing to talk about. The first thing that stands out to me with all of Sarver's alleged actions is just how pretty universal they are. While the individual moments that are just peak awful trash human being moments, they definitely stand out and they do cut the deepest, really, it's the fact that just about any and everybody who has worked with Robert Sarver has an issue with him. The league interviewed over 70 members or former members of the Suns organization who described a toxic and often hostile workplace. The only real difference is in which way these people were abused. Whether it came from misogyny or racism, he was known for using the N-word on multiple instances, with this often being excused by Sarver because he would claim to just be quoting a player. He got into a heated argument with Earl Watson, who was the Suns head coach at the time. You can see the exchange that they had here. It's definitely upsetting. And if we're just pulling the most vile comment he has allegedly made, and this was left out of the NBA's official report on the matter, he allegedly said this about the Suns hiring a black coach back in 2013. I mean, it doesn't get more blatantly racist than that. But just as prevalent as the racism was the misogyny. The Suns organization is not a place you want to work if you're a woman, unfortunately. Not that being in a workplace with a majority men is ever fun for women. He once asked an employee who he wasn't sure if he employed or not, whether or not he quote-unquote owned her, as if him being the rich boss meant that she belonged to him. 4 different employees remarked about an incident where Sarver commented on the size of his penis. He would repeatedly ask inappropriate questions that were sexual in nature to both employees and players, even going as far as asking how good the players' partners were in bed. He allegedly made a comment about how a woman was dressed when she reported that to HR. She was then subsequently fired. Same went for a black employee who told HR that promotions were disproportionately being given out to white employees. So if you work for the Suns, don't go to HR. And really, probably don't go to HR in most instances. Unfortunately, you should seek outside help to abuse in the workplace, because HR very often is going to serve the interest of the corporation far before they serve your interests. So you're kind of talking to the enemy in that instance very often. Not universally, but it's a big problem. Another big issue is that Sarver kind of spread this culture of abuse around the other top executives within the Suns organization, to the point where not just Sarver, but basically anybody up top just fucking sucked. That's not what the report says. This is my opinion. They're all douchebags. There's been an unusually high volume of complaints about the other top executives in the organization displaying similar behavior to Sarver, and the employees are expected to just accept it. Robert Sarver dehumanizes most of the people around him, especially those who don't have the same skin color or gender as him. This is a racist and misogynistic man who has far too much power to make the lives of his employees a living hell. If this is not grounds for being banned from the league, then I really don't know what is. Over 70 employees, former and current, called the workplace toxic. There are dozens of accountings of him saying racial slurs and making misogynistic comments. And really, just him being a grade A dickbag. There's multiple instances of it. Now, you would not be mistaken for hearing about all of this and immediately thinking back to the incident a couple of years ago involving Clippers owner Donald Sterling, who was exposed as a racist and forced to sell the Los Angeles Clippers. Side note, you kind of have to feel bad for Chris Paul for having to deal with this shit 2 times now in his career. It's not fun, I'm sure. But in comparing these cases, Sarver doesn't actually have a much better image coming out of this situation than Donald Sterling does, save for one piece of evidence being a huge difference maker. And because of this, we got an entirely different decision from the league office and Adam Silver, and he explains why here. I'm not actually going to read all of this out loud because frankly, there's a whole lot of nothing in here. It is a typical non-answer answer that politician types do all the time. In some parts, I'd say it gets on a Roger Goodell, we're going to get it right levels of bad. But the one major point we can see here is that Donald's case had a public video to pair with it, so it became a huge story in the NBA world. So, Donald Sterling's case had a smoking gun, whereas Robert Sarver's does not. Now, Adam does not outright say that a lack of smoking gun is the main reason the league came to the decision that it did, but the fact that he felt the need to mention it feels almost like a Freudian slip to me. Donald was an absolute PR nightmare for the NBA when he was exposed, but by swiftly banning him in the manner that they did, they actually swung the PR in a positive direction. Now the NBA and pretty new to the scene Commissioner Adam Silver were being praised for how progressive they were, and displaying a no-nonsense attitude and a zero-tolerance policy for that type of behavior and racism. Adam Silver, the most progressive commissioner in all of sports. Which, you know, I guess that's technically true, but it's like the lowest fucking possible bar. If there was a video of Sarver saying racial slurs rather than multiple corroborated examples and multiple reports of it, which to me still should be enough, the video, the smoking gun, really does make a difference. If there was a video that everyone saw, Sarver would have been out on his ass just like that creepy old fuck Sterling was pretty much immediately. But this is where things start to get more complex. While I pretty strongly believe a different decision should have been made, at the same time, I do understand that this was a complex situation that can't have been easy to navigate for Adam Silver and the league. The problem with kicking Sarver out and publicly condemning him is that Adam Silver would need 3/4 of the NBA's owners to actually agree to kick out Sarver. The same thing applied with Donald Sterling, but Sterling again had the smoking gun, and he was not popular among other owners. Because these are allegations that do not have hard proof or a smoking gun, this is something that owners don't really want to endorse. They don't want to endorse the idea that a couple of employees saying that you did something bad means you get kicked out, because frankly, a lot of owners are shitty people too, and they have done similar things and don't want to be exposed for it. It would almost be like a domino effect. Sarver gets exposed and kicked out, and suddenly they're like, okay, but this owner said this, are we going to do something about that? And I kind of understand where Silver is coming from in not wanting to essentially create a civil war within the NBA between the owners and the NBA league office itself. A lot of owners would view it as, if you're coming after Sarver, you're coming after all of us, and that could have some huge ramifications around the league. And that is the true dark truth about the NBA, that's where the title comes from. It seems like so many NBA owners have so many skeletons in their closet that they don't want to vote out a clearly despicable man. And it says a lot that Silver didn't even bother bringing it to vote in the first place because he knows these scumbag owners would push against it. Now, I'm not saying that all NBA owners are like this, although most majority owners are billionaires and almost every billionaire is evil in my opinion, but regardless of that, it's very clear that there are enough owners in the league who have things to hide that Silver knew that this vote would not go over well. So I understand why Adam Silver decided to make the decision that he did. However, I think this decision is also quite hypocritical and contrary to the image that the NBA and Silver has built up. I think this really highlights the lack of moral backbone and principles the league and Silver has. The reason I believe Adam to be a hypocrite, or another interpretation would be a soulless business-motivated PR machine, is how Adam and the NBA were proud to collect their social justice PR points when it was good for them, but now they won't have a fucking backbone when faced with these same issues today. The NBA banned kneeling during the national anthem when Colin Kaepernick did it. As it spread around the NFL and more players were doing it, the NBA set an outright ban and made it very clear that they would not tolerate that at all. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, suddenly the progressive crowd was the one that held the majority of public favor. So the NBA, faced with potential backlash for not giving the players a platform to speak on these issues, decided to not only let them speak out and let them kneel for the anthem, but they even put the messaging of the Black Lives Matter movement all over the courts and jerseys of its players. Now, they were really strict with what statements the players were allowed to put on their jerseys, which is a little weird. I believe they banned like defund or reform the police or whatever, but overall it was a positive step in the fight against racism, in particular towards Black Americans. And this is fantastic. The NBA made the right decision. They made the moral decision, and I didn't really credit the league for this decision because I knew it was ultimately a PR decision. The NBA didn't decide to do this because they had some upstanding moral backbone, that they had these strong principled beliefs. They just saw the pendulum swing to where embracing the more progressive ideas was the best decision to make for public favor. This is why I basically never give corporations credit for progressive messaging. Corporations quickly realized that by appearing progressive, they could score points and get people to credit them for their progressiveness, even if they don't actually give a shit. It's like how Disney will have gay representation in their movies by having two completely irrelevant background characters kiss in the last, what's that awful fucking movie? The Rise of Skywalker. Two women kissing in the background that they edit out, so when they release it in countries where homosexuality is less embraced, they can just still rake in the dollars. Disney doesn't care about LGBTQ representation, they care about spreading a message that will get them the most positive PR. But when that same message doesn't work in another country, we'll just edit that out real quick. Basically what I'm getting at is the NBA and Adam Silver, again as its figurehead, are only making decisions based on PR, only making decisions based on what they believe to be the best for the corporation, not what is morally right. And while you can say, yeah, that's just a business being a business, you can't then also praise that business for how progressive it is. That's not a person, it's not a soul. The NBA will only ever be as progressive as it makes them money. If being more conservative would result in them making more money, then that's how they would present themselves. Donald Sterling was a huge story when it broke, so Adam and the NBA banned his ass. When the NFL was losing viewership because of players kneeling, the NBA banned it. When endorsing racial justice became the safest move to make, suddenly the NBA was all about it. And when Sarver was exposed as an abusive, racist, misogynistic, power-hungry owner, but not nearly to the degree that it was with Donald Sterling, they gave him a slap on the wrist because it was most convenient. Because Adam didn't want to cause a conflict with the league and its owners. However, the worst part about all of this is that Adam is completely right in his decision-making here from a business perspective. A select few people have spoken out. It will trend on Twitter like twice. A few sports shows covered it for a short segment, and people will move on. And the toxic culture that exists within the Suns, and frankly probably exists in many other league offices, that will remain unchecked. Whatever keeps the most dollars flowing is the decision that is going to be made. And after all of this, the NBA will maintain its image as some sort of beacon of progressiveness among the other top sports leagues, when in reality they are just as immoral and soulless as the rest of them. It's worth saying that I do believe that this was an under-the-table situation and that Sarver was forced out in some way by that degree. However, again, there's a huge difference between Sarver leaving with his head held high and leaving in disgrace. Essentially, Sarver got to avoid being publicly condemned by a massive corporation, which again is a huge deal here and the right decision morally, and the NBA gets to sweep the whole problem under the rug. The whole situation is just monumentally scummy, but hey, that's corporations for you. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that whole situation, and sorry the video is so damn long because Jesus Christ. Apologies to Rudy too, because this is gonna be a bitch to edit. But yeah, that is it. Goodbye.